In 1962, when the movie To Kill a Mockingbird made Gregory Peck super famous, everyone saw him as a really good guy even with all the bad things happening in Hollywood. With his calm way of acting and kind eyes, Peck seemed like the perfect, honest man. But deep down, behind that calm face, he was super annoyed by how crazy and fake the movie business was. On set, Peck often ran into things that tested his patience a lot. There was one time an actor came in with a bag full of booze and three snakes, which made Peck so angry he yelled, "I can't work in a circus like this." Another actor even brought a real gun to make a scene look real, and a bullet almost made the director's helper go deaf. Peck got so mad that he walked right off the set, shouting, "I signed a paper to make movies, not to fight in a war." But who were the movie stars who made him so angry? And what exactly did they do to make Gregory Peck, the calm and polite gentleman, finally lose it? It all started with Marlon Brando, the famous troublemaker of Hollywood, along with his bag of liquor and three snakes. The movie The Missouri Breaks almost didn't get finished because of him. Before signing the paper, Peck had been promised by the bosses that Brando had changed his ways, that he was now more quiet and acted like a pro. But when the film crew got to Montana, Peck realized he had been badly lied to. Brando showed up with a suitcase full of liquor, three pet snakes, and a small toy piano he called his feeling energy helper tool. Every morning he would sit alone in a corner, play a few notes, and whisper to himself, "Today I'm going to act like the color blue." Peck, a man who loved rules and doing things exactly right more than anything, felt like he was falling apart because of the mess. In anger, he asked, "What the heck is he doing?" A crew member answered, "We're not sure. It's some new way to feel things inside." The difference between the two stars was super clear. Peck arrived on set right at 7:00 a.m., carefully reading every page of the script to get ready for the important scene, while Brando would just walk in slowly at 11:30 a.m. This fight between doing things right and being messy, following rules and doing whatever felt good, started a quiet but big fight that pushed Gregory Peck, the guy Hollywood called a goody two-shoes, to the very edge of his self-control. Marlon Brando walked onto the set wearing a woolly hat pulled low over his head, holding a live pigeon in his hands. In front of everyone working on the movie, he loudly announced, "It will act with me today. I want the audience to feel the friendship between a man and a bird that's free." The whole set became silent, shocked by how bossy and full of himself he was. When the scene started, Brando didn't say a single line correctly. Instead, he let the pigeon fly away, his eyes looking far away and dreamy, completely ignoring Gregory Peck, who stood frozen, holding his script that was now useless. Peck felt deeply embarrassed. A few days later, Brando started whispering his lines so quietly that the microphone couldn't even hear them. Watching the mess happen, Gregory Peck finally had enough. Turning to the director Arthur Penn, his voice was shaking as he said, "I need to see a doctor for my brain." Arthur Penn quickly pulled Brando away, barely holding back his own anger. "Marlon, this is a movie, not some magic spell. Gregory can't follow your strange way of acting." Brando just laughed, lit a cigarette, and answered softly, just loud enough for Peck to hear, "Then let him try to feel it." That evening, the two men sat at opposite ends of the hotel bar. Only a few tables were between them, yet it felt like a huge, impossible distance. Brando laughed loudly with his friends, his wine spilling over the glass while Peck sat still, his eyes cold and fixed on his whiskey. Neither said a word, but the quietness between them was heavier than hate. Years later, when asked about Gregory Peck, Brando just smiled slyly and said, "Greg is like a winning statue, good-looking, cold, and has no soul." And when Brando died, a reporter asked Peck if he felt any sorry about it. The question hung in the air with no answer, because maybe the answer was already there in the quiet, unmoving look of the man Hollywood once called its good example. Gregory Peck paused for a moment, then answered quickly, "No, he deserved it." Marlon Brando was gone, but the storm he left behind was far from over. Peck thought he would never again have to deal with such craziness on a film set until he met the next one, Frank Sinatra, the reckless star who drove Gregory Peck to feel insane. The two almost got into a real fight while filming Captain Newman. M.D. Peck was a man of rules, the kind of actor who arrived on set at 6:00 in the morning fully ready. Sinatra was the exact opposite. He often showed up after lunch, sometimes still smelling strongly of alcohol, making the whole crew wait until nearly 11. 30 a.m., yet no one, neither the director David Miller nor anyone from the light or sound groups dared to say anything bad to him. At that time, Sinatra was untouchable. An actor who won an Oscar, a worldwide superstar, and one of the most famous voices in the world. His not being professional made Peck furious. So when Sinatra walked in late and didn't care, Peck quietly told the director, "If he's not sober, I'm quitting this film." Director Miller, knowing how dangerous it was to make Sinatra angry, could only beg, "Greg, this is Sinatra. Don't push him. You don't want to die because of this." For Sinatra, acting was nothing more than a side fun thing to do, a break from his fancy life as a singer. During one serious scene, while Peck was totally focused on his character, Sinatra purposely messed up the serious feeling by whistling and spitting on the floor. Peck stopped quickly, staring right at him. Sinatra only smiled slyly, "Sorry, St. Gregory." When a young helper innocently said that Peck really looked like a priest, Sinatra burst out laughing, raised his glass, and said in a mean way, "A priest? No, he's St. Gregory, the most boring saint in Hollywood." The explosion of anger came during their last scene together. Sinatra arrived 3 hours late, smelling strongly of whiskey. When the director asked him to focus, he shouted, "I don't need this. I've sung at Caesar's palace. I know what feelings are." Peck calmly picked up the script, set it down in front of him, and said quietly, "This isn't a nightclub, Frank. We're making a movie." Sinatra glared at him, his lips curling into a grin before snapping back. "Then go make the movie yourself." And just like that, the set became silent. Two legends standing on opposite sides of professionalism and pride, stuck in a moment that would be remembered as one of the most tense arguments in Hollywood history. Although Gregory Peck finished his role in Captain Newman, MD, he never once looked in Frank Sinatra's direction during the scenes they had together. Even after the movie came out, Peck refused to go to any meetings with reporters where Sinatra was present. It's funny, though, that the very tension between them created a real energy on screen. As one movie reviewer wrote, "Peck brings control, Sinatra brings mess, and together they create a stunning, strong feeling." Later, when asked about his experience filming Captain Newman, MD, Peck replied coldly, "Frank was talented but completely impossible to stand." In his last talk about the subject, when a reporter asked whether he would ever work with Sinatra again, Peck smiled faintly and said, "I'd rather act with an empty chair. At least it won't spit in people's faces." But Frank Sinatra was only the beginning. A few years later, Gregory Peck would face another man, one he would later describe as the most terrible time of my life. That man was Richard Burton. For Peck, his time with Burton became an unforgettable hardship. Their first meeting happened at a very fancy Beverly Hills party. Burton entered with a glass of scotch in his hand, his deep, dramatic voice booming across the room as if he were performing Shakespeare instead of just chatting. When someone introduced Gregory Peck as the man who gave cinema, "It's Atticus Finch," Burton burst into drunk laughter and declared loudly to everyone around him, "Gregory Peck isn't an actor. He's a human rights speech wrapped in an expensive suit." The room exploded in laughter at Burton's bold rudeness, but he wasn't done. At party after party, Burton kept making fun of him, calling Peck St. Gregory or the man who pretends to live perfectly. Even in interviews, Burton couldn't stop taking shots at him, scoffing. "Peck acts as if he's giving a speech at the United Nations." Then, in 1965, when Richard Burton was at the peak of his fame, a new film project came up. The producers wanted both Burton and Peck to star together. The script was sent to Gregory Peck first, and that was when history almost happened again. Gregory Peck read only a few pages of the script before tossing it onto the table and saying coldly, "I can work with anyone except an arrogant idiot like him." Within 48 hours, the project was cancelled. Peck's professionalism and perfect reputation had ended any chance of them working together, giving a heavy blow to Richard Burton's pride. Later, in an interview with a British reporter, Burton confessed that he hated Gregory Peck completely, not for who he was, but for what he stood for. "Peck's good name," Burton sneered, "is the biggest lie Hollywood ever agreed to believe." Burton made no attempt to hide his faults. He drank a lot, had shameful relationships, and often lost his temper. To him, that was the real truth of art and life. Peck, on the other hand, seemed to live untouched by any of it. Calm, disciplined, almost like a saint, Burton viewed that perfection as an unbearable fake thing, something that made fun of his own messiness. Every Time I see his face, I want to throw up. Burton once said, "He's my guilty feeling, the shame I always try to pretend isn't there. He proves that a man can live without being crazy, without alcohol, without sin, and that drives me insane. I hate what he forces me to see about myself." When Richard Burton died in 1984, newspapers around the world printed that famous mean quote again as a sign of his rudeness. The next day, a reporter approached Gregory Peck, asking if he had anything to say about Burton's death. Peck looked into the distance for a moment and replied quietly, "A man like Burton doesn't need me to say anything more." If Frank Sinatra had tested Peck's patience and Burton had hurt his pride, the next man would challenge everything he believed in. John Wayne, the other half of America's divided heart. John Wayne and Gregory Peck hated each other deeply. Wayne, the tough symbol of loving one's country, openly supported the Vietnam War, while Peck signed papers against it and spoke for equal rights for all people. To Wayne, Peck was a goody-goody weakling. To Peck, Wayne was the face of blind aggression. Their slowly burning anger finally erupted at a Hollywood party in 1971. Wearing a leather shirt, Wayne stood before a crowd of producers and actors, raised his glass and growled, "If America were full of men like Gregory Peck, we'd have lost before the first shot was fired." Laughter filled the room, but it faded quickly when Peck, sitting at a distant table, calmly stood up and replied, "And if America were full of men like you, we'd never know what peace is." From that night on, their fight became public. Both refused to appear at any event where the other was present. When the American Film Institute invited them to join a discussion about heroes in American movies, Peck flatly said no, saying, "I don't want to share fame with him." But fate wasn't done with them yet. In 1970, Universal Studios suggested a sequel to True Grit, Rooster Cogburn, with John Wayne and Gregory Peck as co-stars. The contract was almost finished until Wayne saw Peck's name, slammed the script on the table, and roared, "I won't act with that America hater." Peck's answer was just as strong and cold. Two men, two legends, and two completely different ideas of what America truly was, forever separated by pride, what they believed in, and the ideals they refused to give up. Gregory Peck looked the director in the eye and said firmly, "I'd rather die." The tension between him and John Wayne had reached its highest point. As the years went on, their split only got worse. Wayne became more and more active in extreme right-wing political groups while Peck spoke before Congress about peace and equal rights. For 20 years, the two men refused even the smallest kind gesture. When they passed each other in the hallways of the Academy Awards, Wayne would turn his face away while Peck would stop, straighten his tie, and walk past in silence, a subtle but clear act of disrespect. In Wayne's final years, as he was fighting cancer, a reporter asked Peck if he planned to visit him. Peck paused, his face unreadable, and replied, "I pray for his soul, but I still can't stand to look at his face." When John Wayne died in 1979, Hollywood's flags were lowered halfway. Hundreds of stars sent flowers and kind words came from all over the world. Gregory Peck, however, did not go to the funeral. Instead, he sent a single letter to the Wayne family containing only two words, "My condolences." But after Wayne, another man would test Peck's self-control. This time in a completely different way. Not through being full of himself or politics, but through crazy strangeness. His name was Orson Welles, the smart but wild man who never stopped talking. Welles was one of Hollywood's few true geniuses, but also the only man who could push the famously calm Gregory Peck to the edge of losing it. From the very first day of shooting Moby Dick, the feeling on set was suffocating. Peck, as usual, arrived on time, prepared for his sad and intense role as Captain Ahab. But 2 hours later, there was still no sign of Welles, who was playing Father Mapp. Then out of nowhere, he appeared, surrounded by a cloud of cigarette smoke and the lingering smell of wine. When director John Huston scolded him for being late, Welles merely smirked, draped an arm around Peck's shoulder, and said in a teasing way, "Come on, boys, let's not be so serious." Peck frowned and quietly brushed his arm away. Welles's disregard for rules and respect had already gone too far. Things quickly got worse. Welles began getting in the way of the filming, rewriting lines, suggesting new camera shots, even telling Huston he was wrong in front of the crew. During one scene of Ahab's prayer, Welles interrupted, muttering like a crazy person, "Ahab is crazy because of God." When filming the shipboard sermon, Welles ignored the script entirely, delivering his lines in a deep, frantic voice that was fascinating but unrecognizable. Peck, standing just outside the camera's view, watched as Wells performed like a man controlled by a spirit. When Huston finally shouted, "Cut!" Wells didn't stop. He turned directly to Peck and said, "You see that? That's madness. You'll never understand, Gregory. You don't understand anything." Peck stood frozen, his jaw clenched, every muscle tight with fury. The thought flashed through his mind like lightning. God forgive me for not punching him. Wells didn't even seem to hear him. He tilted his head back, gazing toward the sky with a faint, crazy smile. "He doesn't know what madness is," Wells muttered. "What a pitiful little man." From that day forward, Gregory Peck kept his distance. Wells, on the other hand, bragged that his own performance had saved the entire film. Years later, when asked about Wells in an interview, Peck's tone turned cold. "How should I put it?" he said after a pause. "He was like a man who'd fallen from the heavens." Decades later, Orson Welles would retell the story to a group of students, laughing as though it were nothing. "Gregory Peck's a good man," he said, smirking, "but he lacks flavor. I only meant to shake him up a little." After Moby Dick, Peck never again worked with anyone quite like Welles. He stayed away from artistic big egos and strange temperaments, choosing instead roles that showed good values, discipline, and purpose. That time with Welles left him with a hard lesson that genius often comes without honesty. Yet for all the angry, rude men he had met, the one who truly bothered him never raised his voice nor threw an insult. He didn't need to. His mere existence was enough to make Peck feel smaller. But a man controlled by an almost sick need to be better than him, Kirk Douglas. For nearly 20 years, Peck and Douglas fought a quiet war, polite on the outside, poisonous underneath. By the late 1940s, Peck was already a top-level star, the face of Hollywood goodness. Douglas, newly famous after Champion, hated everything that image stood for. He often sneered. Gregory just stands there and lets his good values do the acting. In interviews, Douglas never missed a chance to criticize. When asked about the difference between them, he grinned and said, "Gregory Peck is as stiff as a board, and that's why I'll always be better." The quote spread quickly, making the fight between them worse. Their rivalry reached its highest point in 1963 when Gregory Peck won the Oscar for To Kill a Mockingbird, making him forever remembered as Atticus Finch, the very symbol of moral bravery. As the audience stood up to clap, Kirk Douglas sat in the back row, drink in hand, and muttered loud enough for those nearby to hear, "If he were really Atticus Finch, Hollywood wouldn't be drowning in fakeness." Peck heard him. He turned, gave Douglas a brief, distant look, and said nothing. Later, when a journalist asked about Douglas's comment, Peck simply replied, "He just loves to put on a show." Douglas went on to chase raw, challenging roles, Paths of Glory, Spartacus, the kind of films that showed their teeth. Peck, meanwhile, remained the calm center of Hollywood's conscience. Two men, two different worlds, both brilliant, both proud, and both forever bothered by the reflection they saw in each other. Over the years, that unspoken rivalry began to eat up Kirk Douglas. It made him harder, made him louder, quicker to anger, desperate to prove something that no one had asked him to. He became everything Gregory Peck was not: fiery, competitive, and alone. While Peck stood as Hollywood's image of integrity, Douglas earned a different title: the Old Wolf, forever hungry for attention. When Colia Pictures invited both men to star in The Heroes of Telemark in 1960, director Ray Bolting remembered that Peck refused almost immediately. "I don't want to share the screen with a man who acts only with his chin and is shouting," he said quietly. Douglas heard the remark and exploded. He called Peck the fake with a golden halo, sneering that Gregory was nothing more than a product of studio polish, a saint painted by publicists. From then on, there was no way to fix things. They became the two opposite ends of old Hollywood: smart thought versus feeling, rules versus wanting what you want, silence versus noise. Their feud lasted for decades through awards, getting older and changing times. In an interview during the 1980s, when asked who he believed to be the last true star of the Golden Age, Douglas replied with pride, "Gregory Peck may be a star, but I'm a man, and I'd rather be real than a statue built on lies." Peck never answered. He only smiled faintly and said nothing. To those who asked, he once remarked, "Some people spend their whole lives proving they're not beneath anyone and forget that no one's watching anymore." Years later, time softened them both. In 2001, after Kirk Douglas had a stroke, a reporter asked him about his long fight with P. Eck. Tears welled in his eyes. "Greg was the man I was angry at, wished I could be, and in the end wished I could be." When Peck heard of Douglas's condition, he simply said, "I don't hate him anymore, I just wish we had understood each other." Their story became more than just a Hollywood fight. It was the quiet sadness of two men who fought for meaning in a world that rewarded pretending. Peck believed truth was found in holding back. Douglas believed truth had to be shouted. But in the end, both were remembered not for who won, but for how deeply they were connected. Two souls burning in the same tough light. Because Hollywood, beneath its golden sparkle, is not a dream factory at all. It is a theater built on pretending. Beneath the sparkle lies the machinery of lies. Belief is staged, smiles are practiced, feelings have expiration dates written in contracts, passion is sold, pain is edited after filming, and love is filtered until it can be sold. Fame becomes money, bodies, tools, loneliness, and an unpayable debt. Every movie shot is planned, every tear measured, every kiss perfectly lit. Even truth must be cut short to fit the schedule. The light that once showed the soul now blinds it, selling beauty while eating up the spirit behind it. Behind the velvet curtains lie the ghosts of those who once believed the spotlight could save them. But it never saved anyone. The light was not salvation, it was fire. And in that fire, the weak burned silently while the strong learned to smile through the smoke. Because in Hollywood, even pain must look beautiful. They still call it the American dream. But if you stand there long enough past the applause, beyond the flashes, you might hear something else. Something faint, raw, and achingly human. The sigh of those who once believed in the light before realizing that the light never belonged to them.